Hi, my name is Tyler Stallings. I'm the director of the Frank M. Doyle Arts Pavilion at Orange Coast College. I was really happy to have the chance to facilitate Jim DeFrance, a retrospective. For me, it was a great opportunity to work with the co-curators Tom Dowling and Trevor Norris, along with Nancy Goss DeFrance on this exhibition, because Jim DeFrance was somebody who had a lot of influence on artists in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, especially painters. But at the same time, it was before social media, all that was known about him was kind of forgotten. And so this was a chance to really bring to light all his work, to present a retrospective, over 50 years of work, and to create a catalog to contribute scholarship to the field, which is something I hope that Doyle will be able to continue.
We met in 1983. It was at a loft party in downtown Los Angeles. I don't remember who was having the party, but I do remember I'd been with some friends earlier and had spilled a Coke down my blouse, and I didn't want to go to the party. So my friend gave me this gigantic gray ugly sweatshirt, which I put on over everything. I went to this party, I felt terrible. And then there was this guy across the room who turned out to be Jim, really handsome guy. And he was standing with this beautiful blonde woman. And he came over and talked to me, and I really liked him, but I thought that was weird. And it turned out the beautiful blonde was his daughter, who was very mature looking for her age. So we talked for a long time. We got along really well. And I kept my studio for several months. I had a darkroom in my studio. And then eventually I moved in with Jim, and he built me a studio there, which was great. And the studio he had downtown was owned by Susan Iwasaki, who's the best landlord in the world. And Jim was a really, really good builder. His dad had built houses, so Jim sort of knew how to build anything.
Jim had this gorgeous whited loft that when you were on the inside was perfect. He frosted the windows. And I thought part of it was that's the aesthetic environment he wanted, because he always said painting was a locked-in activity that you have to have, full concentration and so forth. But part of it was because he was really finish fetish.
Everything Jim touched was like tricked out. It was like, it was the most gorgeous studio and the best functioning studio that you could imagine. He was meticulous in that sense. His craftsmanship spilled outside of his art and into his environment as well.
I think it was really important for both of us, but mainly for Jim, to be downtown because we were surrounded by other artists and people we knew and were comfortable around, and we could do work and then walk upstairs or downstairs or knock on somebody's door and have them come over and talk about our work. And then socialize. It was really great.
I saw Jim at that point as being a dedicated artist, a talented artist who wasn't getting enough exposure. He wasn't one of the people that went out.
Of course, we both knew of him, at least back in the 70s. He was a very significant artist, and like many artists of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, he traveled all over California teaching at different art institutions. Trevor knew him much better. They worked together at USC. Trevor was the gallery assistant there, installer and such.
The director, Dr. Selma Holo, and the then dean, John Gordon, organized what I thought was a really nice exhibition called Quiet Commitment. And it featured artists like Jim who just made artwork and weren't out there hustling in the community, weren't trying to promote themselves, maybe even the opposite.
I knew of his work. As an LA painter, he showed at Nick Wilder. He had a show at Sonnabend in New York. I knew who he was, and he was a painter. And it was reductive, and that appealed.
We lived in that loft until 1987. In 88. In 87, there was that Whittier Narrows earthquake. I mean, the building shook like crazy, and bricks were falling off the top story. So then we decided we had to move, and we couldn't find a loft that didn't cost a fortune, so we decided to do something totally different because it would be too depressing to have a creepy little place. So we moved to the valley and got this little rental house on about an acre of property with a 2-story barn. We just refurbished the entire thing. So his studio was downstairs, mine was upstairs.
The change in the studio in Van Nuys or the one downtown is a change that happened for a lot of us. Cheap, accessible space was not there anymore. We couldn't afford it. And Jim I was very happy to see him with Nancy, a nice little house, but his studio was a tenth the size.
Jim got extremely isolated and pretty depressed. He wasn't selling work, so he sort of felt like, why make it if I'm not selling it?
He was a fantastic, dedicated painter, but he was paranoid. He was neurotic in the extreme about social things.
He was always paranoid. And he didn't look that way because he was this big, handsome, strong guy who could pretty much, you felt like he could do anything.
You'd go to a great big crowded opening and we'd come back and we'd be having drinks and so forth, and Jim would be bummed because there was somebody who didn't speak to him.
In either late 95 or 96, Jim felt a little bump on his arm and he went and got a biopsy. The doctor said, I'm sure it's just a fatty tumor. Turned out to be, it said, a high-grade sarcoma, which is a not good kind of cancer at all. And we called his doctor. His doctor, Baum, was the husband of his art dealer, Jan Baum. And we really trusted him. And he got him in to get another pathology report. It turned out to be only grade 2 or something. It was misread the first time. He just had so many health problems. He got lung cancer, and in 2009 went to UCLA and had part of a lung taken out. And then when he was recuperating, we went for a walk around this lake. It's called Balboa Lake. It's out in the valley. It's a really nice lake. Really windy day. And when we got back, we drove up and noticed our front door was wide open. And we walked in, and somebody had come by our house and just stolen everything. Tools and all the electronics and computers and blah, blah, blah. And that's when Jim got really paranoid. And he just wouldn't leave the house because he was afraid that all of his tools would get stolen. And the windows were screwed shut. It was kind of awful.
The idea for the show started when I'd organized the 17 over 70 show and brought Jim DeFrance's work in, and Tom and I then began to talk about our relationship with Jim and our admiration for his work, and Tom suggested that we do a retrospective at some point.
Trevor and I didn't really know how we wanted to approach the show curatorially. We always thought that we would give Jim the opportunity to be the major voice in this endeavor. Many of our hopes at that point were dashed when Jim got essentially sicker and sicker. And so there was no time certainly for us to bother him with this or his family. So we just waited. And as it turned out, Trevor wound up here at OCC, and we picked up the idea again. And this time, of course, we weren't going to be communicating with Jim, but we did talk to his wife, Nancy, and his daughter, Claire, sort of thoroughly in terms of what was available, what we could think of in terms of the scope of the exhibition.
Tom wants to support people that he feels have been overlooked. And man, he did so much work on that. Because a lot of Jim's stuff, we had this shed out in our backyard, was stored in this just funky shed that nothing had been moved in 15 years and was full of cobwebs.
When we went up after Jim passed away, and we went up, Tom and I and Leland, I think, went up there to look through the work, I was saddened again because so much of it had not been taken care of.
We could make the decision that let's take all this stuff out, let's look at it, let's clean it, let's assess it, act like museum professionals and be the registrar and look for all the nicks and the paint chips and that sort of thing, and determine which ones were good enough to exhibit or which ones could be repaired. And what we wound up with was this nearly 50 years of the work of Jim DeFrance. You know, we sort of had an idea of the flow of, you know, we were going to keep it for the most part chronological because Jim made it easy, you know, that way. Much of his work uses a zigzag in its compositions, and so we decided to build a couple walls. One of them you could actually walk through, which sort of mimicked the dancers. And the credenza, the one piece of furniture that was in the show that the great collectors, the Levies from Los Angeles, had lent us. And then as you worked your way to the back of the gallery, you came across the Tories and the poem paintings.
I think retrospectives, when they're done right, are really, really valuable. You need that. In Jim's case, it's a remarkable retrospective because the quality is remarkably consistent, and you're not going to see that in a lot of artists when you go through, oh, there's his fallow period, no, and then he got his mojo back over here, and then in the end he was too moneyed and corrupt. You know, you don't get that with Jim at all. It's remarkable.
Maybe because I was so close to this one, I'm a little biased, but this one was the best. And this one was the one where the LA art community came. It's very hard to get them to Orange County, very hard. And they came, and everyone was just so pleased with the exhibit and getting to see Jim's work. Many of them hadn't seen his work in 10 years or more because he's kind of stopped showing, health reasons mostly. But all around, it's been a great experience.
Well, I think if Jim had seen this retrospective, seen everybody had come to it, seen all of his work together like that, work that he probably didn't even remember having done, heard people speak, listening especially to Peter, because Jim really, really admired Peter a lot. It's so bittersweet because he had no idea that this would happen, that he would have a show like this and that people would care. I mean, it's just really upsetting sometimes. Because didn't get to see it. Would have been made all the difference in the world, you know.